Khamzat Chimaev isn't afraid to fight anyone, and the welterweight is willing to prove it by calling out the most dangerous man in the UFC right now, the newly crowned Alex Pereira. So why does Chimaev think that Pereira would be easy money and that he would smash the Brazilian? Plus, how many millions did Drake lose after betting on Israel Adesanya at UFC 281? Stay tuned for all of that and more fight news, coming right up. First up, was Khamzat on backup duty at UFC 281? Whenever a big show is in the works at the UFC, there are usually a couple of backup plans too. That's why Chael Sonnen had the suspicion that Khamzat Chimaev might have had a role in UFC 281 that he wasn't revealing. The event was headlined by Israel Adesanya and Alex Pereira clashing in the biggest middleweight fights of the year. There was plenty of history between the two, who had fought twice before in kickboxing, and it promised to be full of fireworks. But just in case Pereira couldn't make it on the night for some reason, Chael Sonnen theorized that Chimaev was waiting on the sidelines. Sonnen claims that Chimaev went radio silent when he confronted the Swedish Chechen with the idea. From his experience, it might have meant that Sonnen was onto something. His reasoning for Chimaev being the backup was that Adesanya had already fought all of the top middleweight contenders. If the UFC wanted to keep their fans entertained, then they would have to replace Adesanya with someone new and exciting like Chimaev. Luckily for fight fans, there were no last-minute emergencies, and we got to see Adesanya and Pereira at their best at UFC 281, with Pereira taking the title through a spectacular knockout. It was one of the most dramatic moments of the year. Chimaev has moved one step closer to earning the first championship belt of his career, and if you take him seriously, it will be the first of many. Next up, Chimaev laughs at Pereira's brown belt. On the biggest stage in MMA, Alex Pereira proved that his world-class left hook may be too much for anyone in the UFC. His striking is clearly his strength, which is why Khamzat Chimaev has laughed at the idea of Pereira being awarded a Brazilian Jiu-Jitsu brown belt after his performance against Adesanya. He reposted the image with laughing emojis. When Adesanya and Pereira fought, they kept things on their feet for the majority of the fight. That was to be expected, because they both have kickboxing backgrounds. When the fight did move into the grappling territory though, Adesanya was actually able to control Pereira. Chimaev was watching on the sidelines, certain that he has more than enough wrestling skills to beat someone like Pereira. The evolution of MMA has tended to favor ground game skills. Great strikers are dangerous, but when a fight drags on and it goes to the floor, having the skills to submit or at least fend off your opponent is crucial. Brazilian Jiu-Jitsu was once thought of as the most dangerous grappling skill, until Khabib Nurmagomedov came along with Sambo wrestling, which has proven that strong body control is more important than the submission techniques of BJJ. Chimaev looks to be from a similar style of wrestling, where he's able to suffocate his opponent and wear them down on the ground. So if Pereira wants to beat Chimaev, he's going to need a lot more than a BJJ brown belt. Revenge. UFC 281 was billed as an opportunity for revenge for Israel Adesanya. If he beat Alex Pereira, he would have wiped one of the only marks on his nearly perfect combat record clean. Unfortunately for him, he left New York without his championship belt and still chasing revenge. But he hasn't given up. Speaking on MMA Hour after the fight, Adesanya said that he was sure he would fight Pereira again, possibly 2 more times. UFC President Dana White said that he wouldn't rule out an immediate rematch between the two, which would make it their 4th professional fight in their careers. The reasoning is that Adesanya defended his title 5 times before Pereira, and that he didn't flinch about taking a fight with a man who had knocked him out before. UFC 281 was quite the show, but the question is whether the fight fans are keen on a rematch so soon. It might be more interesting for Pereira to face someone else first, and Adesanya doesn't even mind if Pereira loses the title. He said, "I'll still fight him. I hope he's the champion, but I'm just saying, hypothetically, I'll still fight him." And Adesanya seems to have handled the loss pretty well. He says that he feels lucky to be in the position he's in, and that he had no plans of hiding under a rock after his defeat. But while Adesanya may be desperate to get back in the octagon with Pereira, he might have to get in line. Up next, why does DC think that Chimaev would beat Pereira? And how is Chimaev planning to smash the middleweight champion? Plus, how much money did Drake actually lose from UFC 281? So, don't go anywhere. Chimaev wants to smash Pereira, and the fighter making the most noise is Khamzat Chimaev. He thinks that he has earned a title shot and that Pereira would be be easy. So what makes him so sure that he's the man to beat the new champion? First off, Chimaev has pointed to his record. He has a 12-0 in MMA compared to Pereira's 7-1. Part of the reason for Pereira's quick climb was because of his history with Adesanya. Izzy wasn't afraid to meet the challenge either, but Chimaev thinks that he should get some kind of boost too given his record. And there's no question that he's in form right now. He was billed to fight Nate Diaz at UFC 279, but when he didn't make weight, Kevin Holland stepped in as a last-minute replacement, and Chimaev made quick work of him, finishing him in the first round with a submission. And after watching Pereira knock out Adesanya for the second time in his career, Chimaev still isn't impressed. On Instagram, he pleaded with Dana White to let him smash Pereira, and even said that he was willing to do it in Brazil. Chimaev's strategy in the UFC has been to call out anyone and everyone. In 2020, he set the record for the quickest turnaround time between fights, only taking 10 days off before adding another dominant victory to his record. Next, DC backs Chimaev to take down Pereira. Khamzat Chimaev might seem like his eyes are a bit bigger than his stomach, but one UFC legend has total confidence in him. Daniel Cormier, who was the UFC light heavyweight and heavyweight champion, predicts a tough night for Alex Pereira if he has to deal with Chimaev. DC, who is now a commentator at the UFC, said that Khamzat is the massive favorite to beat Pereira because of the difference in styles. Chimaev is a well-rounded MMA fighter, and his strength is in grappling and positioning. Pereira has yet to come up against a world-class grappler in his career so far, and in fact, his only professional loss came via a rear naked choke submission. His 7 wins have come mostly via knockout or decision. So, he's never truly been tested on the ground in the UFC, but that doesn't mean that DC thinks the two should be booked against each other just yet. Instead, he thinks that Adesanya has done enough to earn himself an immediate rematch to reclaim his title. On top of that, UFC 281 was a close encounter. Just like when Adesanya was knocked out by Pereira in kickboxing, the last stylebender dominated the fight and was ahead on the scorecards before Powhatan's deadly left hand caught Adesanya flush on the chin. Izzy wasn't the only one taking a big loss at UFC 281. Famous Canadian rapper Drake lost a ton by betting on the defending champion. He's been famous for making huge wagers on sports, from Premier League football to boxing, but a Drake curse has also followed him, where many of the athletes he meets with end up losing. Drake has been a fan of MMA for a while, recently publicizing some of the big money bets he's willing to put on his favorite fighters. And we're not talking about hundreds or thousands of dollars here. No, when your net worth is over $250 million, you think in much bigger terms. Drake posted a screenshot of his betting slip before the event, where he revealed that he had wagered $2 million for Adesanya to beat Pereira. That was a lot of confidence to put in the reigning champion, but he stood to gain over $600,000 if he had won. Unfortunately for him, Pereira had a brutal surprise for Izzy in the second to last round, almost knocking him unconscious. As Adesanya argued with the referee about the stoppage, Drake must have been throwing something at his television. It's bad enough losing money down the seat of your car. Could you imagine $2 million disappearing in an instant? It wasn't quite the Drake curse, but next time Drake bets on him, Adesanya might not feel so confident. Do you think that Adesanya will ever be able to beat Pereira? And could Chimaev be the one to take down Pereira? Let us know in the comments below. Thanks for watching, and we'll see you again in the next one.